our chief guest, Pankaj Jalote, graduating students, guardians, faculty, staff of the Institute, invited guests. Good evening, and let me first say what a pleasure and honor it is to be here for the 5th convocation of this Institute. I think we have reached one more landmark. Every year is a landmark, and every year we find some new landmark. The 5th is another kind of landmark, a 5th convocation. And I do see how the Institute has grown over time. You heard the director just give a report of how things have moved and where things are. And I think he's summarized extremely well and with some modesty where the Institute is. And I do want to reiterate once again, as I always do, because stressing it any number of times is not enough, is that this Institute in a very, very short time has created a name of it for itself because of the leadership which Professor Jalote provides and fantastic faculty that we have had, supported by a staff that very much understands what academic needs are and how they should be fulfilled. It's for this reason that we've been able to attract very bright students like you who worked hard over the years here and are going out into the world today in different ways to create a bigger and better name for the Institute, because ultimately in the first years a number of factors determine what an institute stands for, what research it does counts for a great deal, the names of the faculty members and their backgrounds count, but over a period of time all that is taken for granted, and what matters is the quality of its alumni, how well they are doing and what they are doing. I think both are important, and I'll come back to that in a moment later. I just want to spend a moment or two on reflecting on what many of you would have seen, many of you would have experienced, but people from my age group have really seen this telescope into a very short period of time. And that is the change that we are seeing in the world around us, most spectacularly in India, where in the course of a generation we have moved probably a century. Most visible, of course, is in the area of technology. And that's something which is moving so rapidly, changing so rapidly, that it's impossible to predict where we're going to be tomorrow. It's very difficult to say what kind of devices, what methods, what mechanisms, what structures, what jobs there may be in the world of tomorrow. And we see this every day. Just today, many of you would have read about something that's been in the making for a while, but now you're seeing it literally on the road. And that's the first pilot of a driverless taxi launched in Singapore. And doubtless you're going to see many more. And the particular change which you're seeing now is not just that things are changing, but they're changing very rapidly. And this has implications for all of us, for each one of us, and for the country itself. Things are moving fast. People, very naturally, are expecting things to move fast and have become impatient. Which is why, if some of you read the lecture which was given by the Deputy Prime Minister of Singapore yesterday, the first Transforming India lecture, he put it very nicely in terms which all of you would understand. He said, India has to now score in 4s and 6s. And what he meant is that the normal rate of growth, what used to be very negatively called when I was growing up, the Hindu rate of growth of 2 to 3% a year is not enough. And he said, as he put it very well and statistically very visible, even if we grow for between 8 and 10% a year for the next 20 years, we will not catch up even with China's per capita GDP. We will be one of the more developed countries. And I think that tells you that the country has no choice but to grow very rapidly and to move quickly. And this is to do not just with economic prosperity and wealth, which is very important, but it also has to do with the well-being of our people. Because when you grow, you can grow over a long period only if you take care of the basics in the country, including most particularly health and education. Health is an area which we are all aware of, and the problems there are known. I don't want to dwell on them, but education is a key area, and education at all levels. Certainly we need core, basic education at the school level, which is critical, and country after country has shown how important it is and how it affects their development, including the economic development. But we also need to keep up in today's world higher level education, education at the university level, and research. which opens new doors, understands new technologies, is able to adapt to them, and importantly, creates new technologies required for our needs, our context, and our people. And I think these are the kinds of needs that research institutions fulfill. But most importantly, again, an academic institution combines some of these in ways that provide synergy. The interaction between education, outreach, which helps you to understand what true problems are, and research. This interaction amongst these creates the synergy that creates great new things that, as you just heard Pankaj put so well, looks at specific problems which you're geared to solve. And you're geared to solve them because you have the educational background, the skills, and you've got to combine that in a way which looks at real problems and begins to solve them. I think this is one of the things that we begin to see in this country as we need to move forward rapidly, as we face the kind of problems, some of which are sometimes seem overpowering, but which we know can be sorted out, and many of which can be solved not by technology by itself, but technology in combination with a whole host of social and human factors which need to be taken into account. But very clearly, as we move ahead, technology is going to be the underpinning for a great deal of what we do, and going to be an engine for the driver of growth of this country, as it is indeed becoming in countries around the world. And it's in this context that those of you who are graduating today and moving on either to further education or to research or to jobs need to look at what it means for you and how it affects you and what is going to happen to you. One critical factor was already mentioned in Pankaj's talk, and that is innovation. I talk of this every year because it's a great favorite, and I think it's critical to the well-being of societies, communities, countries. If you don't innovate today, you'll probably not survive in tomorrow's world. Competition is intense. Globalization has brought even more competition, and you can't survive in globalization unless you create something new all the time, which means innovating both to find solutions to current problems and innovating for the future. And it's no wonder, therefore, that if you look around the world today and look at the companies that have been most successful, if you look at the top 10 companies by market capitalization today, you'll find that 8 out of 10, maybe 7 depending on how you count one of them, 7 of the 10 most highly capitalized companies in the world today, which means those which are most valuable, are tech companies. Most of which have really been born and seen fruition in this century. They are not old companies, the conglomerates that have grown and built over the years. They're new companies which have grown rapidly, mainly in this century. Some of them were established before the year 2000, but they've really seen growth now. And the bigger among them are much more recent. So if you look around, names very familiar to you, you will see companies like Amazon, like Facebook, like Google, like Microsoft, all of which figure in the top 10, all of which are recent technology companies. And increasingly you're seeing companies which come up with completely new concepts and new business models. The sharing model, the platform model, companies like Uber. So which is the biggest transport company in the world today? It's a company that owns no transport vehicles of its own. It's Uber. Which is the one that handles the most retail with no brick and mortar retail? It's not the big ones you hear of. It's really Amazon. And you can give example after example of which are the biggest companies in their field today, which are really tech companies which have moved on to that. If you look at an old field, comparatively old, automobiles, the most valuable automobile company is not General Motor or Ford, which I grew up with, not even Volkswagen, not even Toyota. It is Tesla. That's because new technology, the valuations are very high. And I think there are lessons there. It's not just to go by market capitalization and what the market says. The market certainly sends you signals. And I think there is clearly an indication of the value of what is perceived and seen. What does this mean for you? What does it mean at the individual level? And I think many lessons you can draw from it, which I will leave to each one of you. But I think one of the very important lessons, which comes not just from the recent thing, but which comes from history, it comes from biology, it comes from evolution, is adaptation. You heard earlier of innovation, but adaptation. Can you adapt to a changing context, to changing needs, to new skills and new knowledge? And that's something which is critical. You've seen this in the evolution of species over years. Those of you with a biology background or a biology interest would recognize that. Species that don't adapt die. As they say, dead as a dodo. Species that adapt survive and do better. So adaptation in a changing world, in a changing context, in a changing environment is as critical as being innovative. The other one, which is an individual trait, which I would suggest each one of you think about, adopt if you like, is as in a cliche, that how high you go, the altitude depends on attitude. Your attitude towards work, towards life, towards your co-workers, towards your team, towards people. It's all about attitude. And if you have high skills and are very smart and clever, but don't have the right attitude, it's frankly going to be difficult in a career. On the other hand, if you have the right attitude, but don't necessarily have the skills yet, don't necessarily have the knowledge, if you have the right attitude, you can go and learn them, you can pick them up. Motivation, as Pankaj mentioned, comes from attitude. So it's something just worth thinking about as you look at the changing world, and I painted a very brief picture of that, and where you need to be and what you need to look at as you move in that direction and begin to see where you are in that whole area. The final comment I want to make on where we are and where we are heading is in terms of something which is very basic and deep. And this is something which I like to stress in different ways year on year, because we tend to forget it. Early on we get very caught up with the excitement of the work we are doing, with the excitement maybe of the material gains that you make, with the kind of job you have, the compensation you get, the company you're in, the kind of work you're doing, what project you're working on. And these are all undoubtedly very, very important. There's no way of minimizing them. But also keep in mind that in the long term, what becomes increasingly critical, I mentioned attitude, is a derivative of that, a characteristic that comes from that, is your basic values, in some way much deeper than attitude. And values determine a great deal of what you will become. It obviously says who you are, but also what you will become. How far you go, where you go, how successful you are, and most importantly, how satisfied you are as a human being, comes from values. And again, to take a crass example, if you look today in the marketplace, and it's a way of judging, it's not your word against mine, let's look at a broader sample. So look at the broadest one, which is the market. And today, increasingly, even companies are being valued not just on the basis of the profit they make, but are being increasingly valued on the basis of their deep integrity and values. So a company that is being seen as having good corporate governance enjoys a higher valuation than companies that are seen as being, on the edge, cutting corners. Maybe they make a higher profit in the short term by cutting corners. But if you look at market valuations over the last few years, particularly in the last decade, and you can go and study this if you want, increasingly companies are being valued also for their underlying value system. And I think there's a lesson there for individuals too, that when you look at how you get valued in the marketplace of ideas and competition and people, values are going to count for a great deal. But most importantly, as I said, the values are something for yourself. When you go to sleep at night and when you wake up in the morning, you wake up with a clear head and a good conscience. And I think that is as important as waking up in a large house or driving a big car. So something again for you to think of, both in terms of the practicality of what it means in terms of your career, but also in terms of what it means to you as a human being. Related to that, a final point on this is really values, not just with relation to yourself and what you do, but in relation to larger society. Again, Pankaj mentioned give back, and as he said, he quantified the figures. You get something and you give a lot to the government as taxes, and hopefully you'll give some to the institute as a contribution at some point of time. But also, what do you give to society in terms of not just money, but time, effort, commitment, caring? Are you part of a larger society where you look at other human beings in a sensitive way, understand their needs, and are empathetic to them? I think that's a critical factor also. Again, interestingly, I like to jump back and forth between basic values, which is, a pep talk and a lecture, versus just down-to-earth reality. And if you look at down-to-earth reality today and you talk to any entrepreneur, he will tell you that a lot of the business comes from understanding the problems of people and seeing, hey, what solution can I build for that? And the solution is not something that's just a technology. A solution comes from the problems which you see that people have, some problem that people face. And you never understand that unless you have a degree of empathy to be able to understand what is the problem of the community, your consumer, the market that you're in. So an understanding and sensitivity to people is a key element of being able to design solutions that are successful in any sense. Successful in terms of use, successful in terms of money, successful in terms of going out. I wanted to just share a few words on this with you. I want to once again tell graduating students that you've had a great few years here. You've seen ups and downs. You've seen the campus grow. You've seen it growing even now. It's going to be a much bigger institute by the time we have our next convocation. You've had the advantage of working and learning from a great faculty in a good environment. Now go out, make your name, capture the world, and raise the flag of the IIIT-Delhi high. Good luck to all graduating students. Best wishes to you as you go out. Certainly remember the institute, remember your guardians and parents who may have sacrificed a great deal to get you here and through here, and look at the world as something that contributed to all that. All the best to you. Thank you. Thank you. I want to hand over now, which is what really is the exciting part of this, apart from you folks receiving your degrees, to hear somebody who's iconic, and all of you would know him, so I'm not going to really take time introducing him, but Mr. Naveen Tiwari, one of the fantastic entrepreneurs from India, much under the radar. You don't see his photo splashed over as much as you see certain others. You don't see him written about as much, but amazing story. I hope he tells you part of it. I don't know what he's going to say, but it's truly amazing story. If he doesn't, go and look for it and search for it, the kind of work that he's done and what he's been able to do. One of the very, very few companies in the world, leave alone from India, who reaches out to touch 1 billion plus people. What he does reaches out to more than 1 billion people. The only company from India to give serious competition to the likes of Google. I mentioned Google as one of the top 10, and here's a company in Mobi that actually gets Google a bit worried, and more than a bit worried in their own field of competition. In many, many ways, we requested Naveen and he kindly agreed because he is the role model. In our very first convocation, we had a different kind of role model, Mr. Narayan Murthy. It was the first convocation, so those who are here, except those who are doing their M.Tech from a B.Tech here, wouldn't have seen him, but the faculty knows and some of you guests might know. And that's one kind of role model, Mr. Narayan Murthy, a phenomenal role model. But for younger people, I'm sure you need a younger role model, not people like me or Mr. Murthy, and you have Naveen Tiwari. Fabulous career, tremendous background, IIT Kanpur, and then Harvard Business School, an MBA from there. I would say that among the 2 best institutions in the world. And I'm sure Dheeraj will agree with me when I refer to IIT Kanpur as one of the best in the world, and in a way so will Pankaj and some of the other faculty members here. And certainly Harvard Business School enjoys a tremendous reputation. Did exceedingly well there, got the Dean's Medal, did some amazing work, has got a whole host of awards which I don't want to mention now. Great enthusiast, a great supporter, not just doing great things for his company. And this is what I meant, and I've come back to that reality of looking at your community, of the somewhat very cliched and a word I don't particularly like, but it summarizes it, give back. And he, has helped to any number of startups, both mentorship and in funding. And those of you interested in entrepreneurship might want to catch him sometime, not today, to do what is known as an elevator pitch, which you all know. But if you want to do an elevator pitch to Naveen, here's a gentle hint to some of you. Better practice running. Because one of the things he does regularly is run every morning. And so if you want to catch him and pitch your idea, become a long distance runner and just run along with him and try and pitch your idea while you pant and sweat. So look at that as a possible thing. A great runner, enthusiastic sportsman. I'm sure that he's going to take some time off later today to go and watch the T20 in the US of all places. Cricket fan. Done some great things. And I mentioned social commitment. I was very, very happy I know of this, but to specifically find out a little more about his commitment to education in India. He helps and chairs a foundation that does education in rural India for school children there, among the many other things he does which are not written about or not widely known. I'll stop there because I know you want to hear him. A great pleasure indeed, Naveen, to have you here. Thank you for being with us and love to hear you.